Sometimes saving a life means facing the one who's been destroying yours. Ranch hand Caleb Stone didn't think twice when he saw the wagon break apart in the Red Clay River's flash flood. He spurred his horse into the violent current and grabbed the elderly woman before the water pulled her under. But when they made it to shore, gasping and dripping, everything changed. The woman beside him was the Widow Blackwood, the valley's powerful landowner, the one who controlled the water rights and had been killing his ranch. Now she sat on the muddy bank with her waterproof satchel open and those iron-clad deeds in her hands. Would his act of courage break her hold on the valley? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The sun hadn't cleared the eastern ridge when Caleb Stone stepped out of the bunkhouse, and already he could feel the heat building. 3 years of drought had turned the valley into something he barely recognized. Where green pastures once rolled toward the horizon, cracked earth stretched like broken pottery. The morning air carried no moisture, just the dusty smell of dying land. He reached into his vest pocket and pulled out the broken pocket watch. The hands were frozen at 3:47, the exact moment 2 years ago when his father had collapsed in this very yard. The doctor said it was his heart, but Caleb knew better. It was the drought. It was watching everything they'd built together dry up and blow away. It was knowing that one woman held all the water rights and chose to keep them locked away while good people suffered. Caleb closed the watch and tucked it back into his pocket. He'd carried it every day since the funeral, a reminder of his father's final words. "Promise me you'll save this place. Promise me you won't let her win." "Morning, Rapid," old Pete called from the barn door. The nickname had stuck since Caleb was 15, the day he'd ridden into the rapids to pull out Tommy's older brother. Some habits die hard, Caleb thought. Saving people from water seemed to be one of his. "Morning, Pete. Livestock? Down another 2 head overnight. Can't keep them alive on what we're giving them." Old Pete's weathered face showed every one of his 67 years. He'd worked Thornridge Ranch for 40 of them, back when the streams ran clear and the grass grew thick. Caleb nodded, the familiar weight settling in his chest. 2 more. That made 17 this month. Marcus Thornridge was already talking about selling off the breeding stock, the last valuable thing the ranch had left. "Boss, want to see me?" "In the house." He's got that look again. Caleb crossed the dusty yard. The ranch house had been grand once, his father used to say. 2 stories of solid timber with a wraparound porch and a view of the whole valley. Now, the paint was peeling, and half the shutters hung crooked. Hard to maintain a place when you're fighting just to keep it alive. Marcus Thornridge stood at the kitchen window, coffee cup in hand, staring out at the dry creek bed that used to feed their water tank. He was 73 but looked older, the drought aging him faster than time ever could. He'd been his father's best friend. And when Caleb's mother died in childbirth, Marcus had helped raise him. The man was family in every way that mattered. "Caleb, coffee?" "Thanks." Caleb poured himself a cup from the pot on the stove. The coffee was weak. They'd been stretching the grounds for weeks, but it was hot. "Rode the north section yesterday," Marcus said. "Spring up there's completely dry now. That was our last natural water source." Caleb knew what was coming. They'd been dancing around this conversation for months. "We've got maybe 6 weeks left," Marcus continued. "Then we'll have no choice but to sell. Harper from the consortium's been sniffing around, offering pennies on the dollar. He knows we're desperate. We're not selling. Son, I appreciate the sentiment, but there's no water. We can't run cattle without water. We can't grow hay without water. Hell, we can barely keep ourselves alive without water." Caleb set down his cup. "The red clay's still running. A trickle. And you know as well as I do that Blackwood controls the rights to every drop that flows through this valley. She's made it clear no one draws from any source without her permission. Last rancher who tried, she had the sheriff on him within a day. So we just give up? Let her win?" Marcus turned from the window, and Caleb saw the exhaustion in his eyes. "I'm not giving up. I'm being realistic. Your father fought her for 5 years, and where did it get him? In the ground at 52. The words stung, but Caleb knew Marcus didn't mean them cruelly. The old man was just tired, worn down by years of watching everything slip away. I need you to ride the river patrol today, Marcus said, changing the subject. Check the banks, see if there's any sign of the water rising. Pete says there's weather moving in from the mountains. I'll head out after breakfast. Take Dusty. He's got good instincts for water. Caleb nodded. Dusty was his horse. A sturdy roan gelding he'd trained himself. The animal had an uncanny sense for finding water and had saved Caleb's life more than once when they'd gotten caught in sudden currents. Back at the bunkhouse, Tommy was up and making breakfast, or what passed for it these days. Beans and hardtack, same as every morning. The kid was 19, all gangly limbs and enthusiasm despite everything. He'd come to the ranch 2 years ago, right after Caleb's father died, looking for work and a place to belong. Morning, Rapid. Pete says you're riding the river today. That's right. Think the weather's finally turning? Caleb looked out the window at the pale sky. Maybe. Don't get your hopes up, though. Hard not to. Been so long since we had rain, I almost forgot what it looks like. They ate in silence, the kind of companionable quiet that comes from living and working alongside someone day after day. When they finished, Tommy gathered the plates while Caleb prepared for the ride. He checked his canteen 3/4 full, enough for the day, and made sure his rope was coiled properly on his saddle. The river patrol was usually uneventful, just a long ride along the banks, checking for anything unusual. Breaks in the levees, fallen trees blocking the flow, occasionally signs of someone trying to illegally tap the water. Dusty was waiting in the corral, already sensing they were going out. The horse nickered softly as Caleb approached, and Caleb ran his hand along the animal's neck. They'd been partners for 7 years, since Dusty was a 2-year-old colt. His father had picked the horse out special, said he saw something in the animal's eyes, intelligence, loyalty, courage. Today might be interesting, boy, Caleb murmured as he tightened the cinch. Pete thinks the weather's changing. The horse stamped once, as if in agreement. Old Pete walked over, leading his own mount. Mind if I ride with you part way? Want to check the fence line where it runs along the river? Welcome, company. They rode out together, taking the trail that led north toward the high country. The red clay river wound down from the mountains, cutting through the valley like a snake. In the old days, it had been wide and powerful, fed by snowmelt and mountain springs. Now it was a shadow of itself, barely 20 feet across in most places, and shallow enough to wade in summer. Your father used to love this ride, Pete said after a while. Said it was the prettiest piece of country he'd ever seen. He was right. He'd be proud of you, you know. Way you've stuck with this place, tried to hold it together. Caleb didn't respond. Pride didn't pay the bills or water the cattle. They rode in silence for another hour before Pete split off to check his fence line. Caleb continued north, following the river's edge. The banks were steep here, carved out by decades of spring floods. It was dangerous country if you didn't know it, but Caleb had ridden it so many times he could navigate it with his eyes closed. The broken pocket watch pressed against his ribs with each stride of the horse. He thought about his father's promise, the vow he'd made standing over the grave. Save the ranch. Don't let her win. But how do you fight someone who controls the one thing you need to survive? The Widow Blackwood was a legend in the valley, though few people had ever seen her. She'd inherited the water rights from her husband 20 years ago, along with the big house up on the bluff and enough money to buy half the county if she wanted. Her husband had been ruthless but fair. He'd allowed the ranchers to draw water as long as they paid their fees and respected the resource. But when he died, everything changed. The widow shut off access to everyone except the few operations willing to pay her exorbitant prices. She claimed she was protecting the watershed, ensuring it would last through the drought. But everyone knew the truth. She was consolidating power, buying up land from desperate sellers, building an empire. Caleb's father had tried to reason with her. He'd ridden to her house a dozen times, asked for meetings, written letters. She'd refused every approach. The last time he went, her foreman turned him away at the gate, said Mrs. Blackwood didn't have time for dying ranchers begging for charity. That was 3 weeks before his heart gave out. Caleb pushed the memory away and focused on the river. The water was lower than yesterday, just a thin ribbon winding between mud banks. A few cottonwood trees still stood along the banks, their roots reaching deep enough to find moisture, but most of the vegetation was dead or dying. He was about to turn back when he noticed something different in the air. The temperature had dropped, and the sky to the northwest was darkening, not the pale haze of a dust storm, but real clouds, thick and heavy with moisture. Dusty sensed it too. The horse's ears pricked forward, and he snorted softly. "Easy, boy." Might be nothing, but even as he said it, Caleb felt a flutter of something he hadn't felt in 3 years' hope. Real rain, not the occasional sprinkle that dried before it hit the ground, but a genuine storm. He dismounted and led Dusty down to the water's edge. The river was running clear here, which meant the springs upstream were still producing a trickle. He knelt and cupped his hands, bringing the cold water to his lips. It tasted clean, pure, like the mountains it came from. This was what his father had fought for. This resource, this life-giving flow that could sustain them all if only one woman would allow it. Caleb stood and gazed upstream toward the high country where the Blackwood house sat on its bluff, looking down over everything she controlled. Somewhere up there, in that big house with its manicured grounds and full water tanks, the widow lived in comfort while the valley died around her. "Someday," he said to Dusty, "things are going to change." The horse whinnied softly, and Caleb remounted. He'd check another few miles of river, then head back to report to Marcus. The weather was definitely shifting. Those clouds were building fast, and the air pressure was dropping. His ears were starting to pop. As he rode, he thought about what rain would mean. It wouldn't solve their problems. 3 years of drought couldn't be erased by one storm, but it would buy them time. The creek beds would flow again, at least for a while. The grass might green up. The cattle would have something to drink besides the rationed water from the one well still producing. He was so lost in thought that he almost missed it, a flash of movement on the river trail ahead. Caleb pulled Dusty to a stop and squinted into the distance. There, maybe half a mile upstream, a covered wagon was making its way down the narrow path that ran alongside the river. That was strange. Nobody traveled this road anymore. The main trail went around the long way, avoiding the river entirely because of how treacherous the banks could be. You'd only take this route if you wanted to stay hidden or if you didn't know the country. Caleb urged Dusty forward, curiosity pushing him on. As he got closer, he could make out more details. The wagon was expensive, well made, with a canvas cover that looked new. A single driver sat up front, and through the gap in the canvas, Caleb could see at least one passenger inside. Travelers? Out here? Then he saw what the wagon was heading toward, and his blood ran cold. The ford. The old river crossing that used to be safe when the water was low and predictable. But the red clay was never predictable, and with those storm clouds building upstream, anyone who knew the country knew to stay away from the crossings. Caleb kicked Dusty into a gallop, racing toward the wagon. He had to warn them, had to tell them to turn back. But even as he rode, he saw the first fat drops of rain beginning to fall, and he heard something that made his heart stop, a deep, distant rumble that had nothing to do with thunder. That was the sound of water moving fast. Somewhere, up in the mountains, the storm had already broken, and the flash flood was coming down. Caleb stood in his stirrups and shouted, his voice carrying across the distance, "Turn back! Flash flood coming!" The wagon driver either didn't hear him or didn't understand. The vehicle kept moving toward the ford, wheels creaking as they navigated the rocky path. "Stop!" Caleb yelled again, waving his hat in the air. "The crossing's not safe." This time the driver turned, saw Caleb racing toward him, and pulled the horses to a stop. but it was too late. The rumble was getting louder, and Caleb could see it now, a wall of brown water 30 feet high, churning with debris, bearing down on them from upstream. The driver saw it too. His face went white, and he started to turn the wagon around, but the path was too narrow. There wasn't time. "Get out!" Caleb screamed as he reached them. "Abandon the wagon!" The driver jumped, landing hard on the muddy bank and scrambling up the slope. But someone was still in the wagon, the passenger, an elderly woman, struggling with the canvas flaps from inside. Caleb didn't think, he just acted. It was the same instinct that had earned him his nickname, the same impulse that had sent him into the water a dozen times before. He drove Dusty straight toward the wagon just as the flood hit. The wall of water struck the wagon broadside with the force of a locomotive. Wood splintered and cracked. The canvas tore away. The wagon horses screamed and broke free from their traces, swimming desperately for the bank. And there, tumbling in the violent current, was the woman. Caleb sent Dusty into the water. The horse didn't hesitate, didn't balk at the churning brown current or the debris tree branches, fence posts, parts of buildings from upstream swirling around them. The animal trusted Caleb completely, and Caleb trusted himself. The current was powerful, trying to sweep them downstream. Dusty fought it, swimming strong, and Caleb leaned out of the saddle, reaching for the woman. She was conscious, struggling to keep her head above water, her arms flailing for purchase on anything solid. Their hands missed once, twice. The third time, Caleb caught her wrist, his fingers closing tight around the thin bones. He pulled, using all his strength and Dusty's momentum to drag her toward the saddle. She grabbed onto the saddle horn with her free hand, coughing and gasping. "Hold on!" Caleb shouted over the roar of the water. "Just hold on." Dusty turned toward the bank, swimming at an angle to use the current rather than fight it. Caleb kept one hand locked on the woman's wrist and the other on the reins, guiding the horse toward a spot where the bank sloped gently enough to climb out. Something large, a piece of a barn door, slammed into Dusty's hindquarters. The horse stumbled but kept swimming. Another few yards, another moment of struggle. Then Dusty's hooves found bottom, and they were staggering up the muddy slope, water streaming off them, lungs burning. They collapsed on solid ground 20 feet from the raging river. The woman rolled onto her side, coughing violently, muddy water spilling from her mouth. Caleb lay on his back, chest heaving, rain falling on his face. Dusty stood over them, sides heaving, but on his feet and alert. For a long moment, the only sounds were their labored breathing and the roar of the flood. Then the woman pushed herself up onto her hands and knees, her grey hair plastered to her skull, her fine clothes ruined and torn. Her hood had fallen back during the rescue, and for the first time, Caleb saw her face clearly. Refined features, despite the mud and exhaustion, high cheekbones, a strong jaw, intelligent eyes. She was perhaps 70, but carried herself with a dignity that even a flash flood couldn't wash away. And around her neck, glinting beneath the torn collar of her dress, was an expensive sapphire necklace. Then Caleb saw what had floated up beside them, a piece of the wagon's painted side panel, torn free by the flood. Through the mud and damage, he could still make out the crest painted there, a black bird perched on a water wheel, the Blackwood family crest. His heart went cold. The woman followed his gaze to the panel, then looked back at him. In her eyes, he saw recognition of what he'd just realized. She sat back on her heels, still breathing hard, and despite everything, she smiled slightly. "You saved me," she said, her voice hoarse but strong. "You don't know what you've done." Caleb found his voice. "I know who you are." She studied him with those intelligent eyes, taking in his weathered face, his rancher's clothes, the rope burn scars on his hands from years of working cattle. "Do you now? You're the Widow Blackwood." She didn't deny it, just nodded slowly, water dripping from her hair. "And you would be?" "Caleb Stone. I work at Thornridge Ranch." Something shifted in her expression, not quite guilt, but something close to it. Recognition, maybe. Thornridge, I see. Your driver, Caleb said, remembering suddenly. He looked around and spotted the man scrambling down from higher ground, soaked but unharmed. Madame Blackwood, the driver called, stumbling toward them. Thank God, I thought when I saw the water. I'm fine, Charles. Thanks to this young man, she looked at Caleb. Help me up, if you would. Caleb stood and offered his hand. She took it, and he pulled her to her feet. She swayed slightly, and he steadied her with a hand on her elbow. The driver rushed over and took her other arm. We need to get you to shelter, madame. You need dry clothes, a doctor. I need, she interrupted firmly, to sit down for a moment and collect my thoughts. She was still clutching something in her left hand, Caleb noticed. A leather satchel, waterproof by the look of it, with a metal clasp. She'd somehow held onto it through the entire ordeal. It must have been important. The storm was fully upon them now, rain falling in sheets, lightning cracking across the darkened sky. But the worst of the flood had passed. The river was still running high and dangerous, but the initial wall of water had moved downstream. There's a shepherd's hut about a mile south, Caleb said. Old, but it'll keep us dry until this passes. The widow looked at him for a long moment. You could have let me drown. The statement hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. They both knew what she meant. She was the woman who'd been killing his ranch, who'd as good as murdered his father. He'd have been within his rights to turn away, to let the river take her. No, Caleb said simply. I couldn't have. She studied his face as if seeing him for the first time. No, I suppose you couldn't. She glanced down at the satchel in her hand, her thumb running over the metal clasp. Charles, check on the horses. But Madame, go. The driver hesitated, then trudged off through the rain, calling for the wagon horses. The widow sat down on a fallen log, seemingly unconcerned about the mud and rain. She opened the satchel carefully, checking the contents. Caleb caught a glimpse of papers inside, official-looking documents with red seals and ribbons. Do you know why I was traveling this road? She asked, without looking up. No, ma'am. I was coming to see the drought damage for myself. My foreman tells me things are difficult, but I wanted to see with my own eyes. So I had Charles bring me down the river road, away from the main trail where people might recognize my wagon. You were checking on the drought? I was checking on what my policies have done. She looked up at him then, and her eyes were hard. I'm not a fool, Mr. Stone. I know what people think of me. I know what I've done to this valley. Caleb didn't know what to say to that. The woman who'd killed his ranch was sitting in front of him, admitting her guilt. Your father, she continued, John Stone. He came to see me many times. I know. I refused to meet with him. I know that too. I was wrong to do that. The words seemed to cost her something. I was angry at this valley, at my husband for loving it more than he loved me, at the land for taking him away. And when he died, I took that anger out on everyone else. The rain was falling harder now, and Caleb knew they needed to move soon or risk getting caught in another flood surge. But he couldn't walk away from this conversation, not yet. You have the deeds in there, he said, nodding at the satchel. The water rights. She looked down at the papers. I do. I always carry them. They're the source of my power, you see. My insurance that no one can take from me what's mine. They're killing people. I know. She closed the satchel and stood, meeting his eyes. And the man I've been killing with them just risked his life to save mine. Charles returned, leading 2 of the wagon horses. They were spooked but alive. Found them downstream, madame. The others must have been swept away. We need to move, Caleb said. Another surge could come through. Follow me. He led them south along the higher ground, away from the river, with Dusty following behind like a loyal dog. The widow walked between him and Charles, her hand still clutched tight around that waterproof satchel. She didn't speak during the trek, just kept her eyes on the ground ahead of her, her expression unreadable. Caleb's mind was racing. This was the woman who'd destroyed his family. She was standing right here, admitting what she'd done, and he'd just pulled her from certain death. What happened now? Would she just go back to her big house and continue as before? Or had something changed in those moments in the water? When they reached the shepherd's hut, he pushed open the door and ushered them inside. It was small and musty, but dry. The widow sat on a rough wooden bench, and for the first time she looked every one of her 70 years. The ordeal had taken its toll. She opened the satchel again and drew out the papers, the water deeds, the documents that controlled every drop that flowed through the valley. She stared at them for a long moment, then looked up at Caleb. "You asked me a question back there," she said. "You asked if saving me would break my hold on this valley." Caleb remembered that moment on the bank when he'd seen the deeds in her satchel. "Yes, ma'am." "Well," she said quietly, holding his gaze, "let's find out." The widow's words hung in the air of the small hut while rain hammered the roof. Caleb stood near the door, water dripping from his clothes, watching this woman who held so much power over his life study the documents that gave her that power. "Charles," she said without looking up, "go wait with the horses. I need to speak with Mr. Ben Stone privately." The driver looked uncertain. "Madame, I don't think—" "That wasn't a request." Charles nodded stiffly and stepped outside, closing the door behind him. The widow waited until his footsteps faded before she spoke again. "Sit down, Mr. Stone. You look exhausted." Caleb didn't want to sit. He wanted to know what she meant by those cryptic words, but his legs were shaking from the adrenaline wearing off, so he lowered himself onto the bench opposite her. "How old are you?" she asked. 28. "And you've worked at Thornridge how long?" "All my life. I was born there. My father was Marcus Thornridge's foreman." She nodded slowly. "John Stone, yes, I remember him from the letters he wrote. He was articulate, passionate about this land. He loved it. It killed him." "I killed him," she corrected, and there was no self-pity in her voice, just statement of fact. "Let's not dance around it. My policies, my refusal to negotiate, my stubbornness, all of it led to his death and dozens of others. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Mr. Stone. I'm simply stating the truth." Caleb didn't know what to say to that. All the anger he'd carried for 2 years seemed suddenly inadequate in the face of her blunt honesty. "Why?" he finally asked. "Why shut off the water? Your husband allowed the ranchers to use it. What changed?" She was quiet for a moment, arranging the papers on her lap. When she spoke, her voice was softer. "My husband loved this valley more than he ever loved me. He spent his days riding the range, checking the water levels, meeting with ranchers. He knew every creek and spring by name. He knew every family that depended on this watershed." "That sounds like a good man." "He was, but he was never home. I sat in that big house alone, year after year, watching him pour his heart into something that wasn't me. And when he died, I found out he'd left instructions in his will, detailed plans for managing the water rights, ensuring the valley would thrive. Nothing about me, nothing about what I should do or how I should live, just instructions for the valley." Caleb began to understand. "So you took control of the one thing he loved. Petty, isn't it?" She smiled bitterly. "A 70-year-old woman's revenge against a dead man. I told myself I was protecting the resource, ensuring it wouldn't be wasted. But the truth is, I was punishing everyone who'd had a piece of my husband's heart when I had so little of it." The rain was letting up slightly, the heavy downpour settling into a steady drumming. Caleb glanced at the door, wondering if Charles was close enough to hear this conversation. Probably not. And probably it didn't matter. This woman seemed intent on confessing. "What changed?" Caleb asked. "Why were you coming to see the damage now?" She looked down at the deeds again. "Last month, I heard that another rancher had died, Thomas McCarthy. He shot himself in his barn after the bank foreclosed on his property, left a wife and 3 children. Caleb knew the family. He'd gone to the funeral with Marcus. I told myself it wasn't my fault," the widow continued, "that he must have had other problems, other debts. But then my housekeeper mentioned that she'd seen Mrs. McCarthy in town, and the woman looked like a ghost. Said she'd aged 20 years overnight." She paused. "That's when I knew I couldn't hide anymore. I had to see what I'd done. I had to look at it with my own eyes. And what did you see? Dying land, empty homesteads, children leaving their families because there's no future here. I saw my husband's valley turning to dust because I was too angry and too proud to let go. She met his eyes. And then I saw a young man risk his life to save the woman who's been destroying everything he loves. That showed me something I'd forgotten, that there's still good in this valley, still people worth saving it for. Caleb felt the weight of her words. He'd expected many things from this encounter, but not this raw honesty, not this genuine remorse. "What happens now?" he asked. She tapped the documents. "These are the master copies of the water rights. Every claim, every deed, every restriction in this valley flows from these papers. They represent 20 years of my husband's work and 3 years of my mismanagement. You're not going to... I'm going to do what I should have done 3 years ago." She stood, walking to the small window of the hut. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, and patches of blue were visible between the clouds. "I'm going to release the restrictions. All of them. Every rancher in this valley will have access to the watershed, free of charge, in perpetuity." Caleb felt his heart hammering. "You're serious." "I'm an old woman who just faced death, Mr. Stone. That tends to clarify one's priorities." She turned back to him. "But I need something from you first." There it was, the catch. Caleb felt the hope deflating. "What?" "I need you to help me do this right. I don't know these ranchers anymore. I don't know who's hanging on by a thread and who's already given up. I don't know where the worst damage is or how to distribute access fairly." She paused. "But you do. You've lived here all your life. You know every family, every ranch, every need. You want me to help you. I'm asking you to help them. Help the valley. This isn't about me earning redemption, Mr. Stone. I'm long past that. This is about making sure that when I do release these rights, it actually helps the people who need it most." Caleb stood and walked to the window beside her. Through the clearing weather, he could see the red clay river still running high, brown water churning between its banks. In a few hours, it would start to recede. In a few days, it would return to its normal trickle. But the rain had come. The land would drink its fill, at least for now. "Marcus," he said, "he needs to be part of this. He knew your husband. He knows the valley better than anyone. Then we'll speak with him." She held out her hand. "Do we have an agreement?" Caleb looked at her hand, then at her face. He saw determination there, and exhaustion, and something else, hope, maybe, or the faint echo of it. This woman who'd been his enemy was offering to undo 3 years of damage. His father's death wouldn't be meaningless. The ranch could survive. He took her hand. "We have an agreement." "Good." She returned to the bench and began carefully placing the documents back in the waterproof satchel. "Now, I believe you mentioned something about needing to get back to Thornridge Ranch. I assume you need to report about the flood. They'll be worried. I've been gone longer than expected. Then let's not keep them waiting. Charles can ride one of the wagon horses back to my estate and send a carriage. You and I can ride together to Thornridge. I'd like to speak with Marcus Thornridge as soon as possible." "You're coming to the ranch? Unless you'd prefer I didn't." Caleb thought about Marcus's reaction to seeing the Widow Blackwood ride up to his door, thought about old Pete's face and Tommy's shock, thought about what the other ranchers would say when word got out that she'd been at Thornridge. Then he thought about the water deeds in that satchel and what they represented: life for the valley, hope for the families still hanging on, a future worth fighting for. "You're welcome at Thornridge Ranch," he said. "Always have been, truth be told. It was you who stayed away." She smiled, and for the first time it reached her eyes. "Then let's go introduce me to the people I've wronged. It's past time I met them face to face." The ride back to Thornridge took longer than usual. The widow insisted on riding one of the wagon horses, despite Caleb's offer to let her ride with him on Dusty. She said she needed time to think, and the slow pace of the injured horse gave her that. Charles had ridden ahead on the other wagon horse to arrange for a carriage from the Blackwood estate. That left Caleb and the widow traveling alone through the rain-washed valley. The storm had moved on, leaving everything dripping and fresh. The smell of wet earth filled the air, a scent Caleb had almost forgotten. "It's beautiful," the widow said after a long silence. "I'd forgotten how beautiful this valley is after rain." Caleb looked around at the landscape he'd known all his life. The red clay gullies were running with water, carving new paths through the parched earth. The cottonwoods along the dry creek beds were already looking greener, their leaves perking up with the moisture. In the distance, the mountains were wrapped in mist, mysterious and ancient. "My father used to say this was God's country," Caleb said there was no place on earth more perfect for raising cattle and horses. He was right. My husband said the same thing. She paused. "They would have been friends, I think. Your father and mine, maybe in another life." They rode in comfortable silence for a while. Caleb kept checking the horizon, watching for the familiar outline of Thornridge Ranch's buildings. He was dreading the moment they arrived, the moment he'd have to explain to Marcus who he'd brought home and why. "Tell me about the people at the ranch," the widow said. "Marcus Thornridge owns the place. He's 73, been running cattle here for 50 years. He and my father grew up together. When my mother died having me, Marcus helped raise me." "And the others?" "Old Pete. He's the oldest hand. Been at Thornridge since before I was born. Good man, knows more about ranching than anyone I've ever met. Then there's Tommy, the youngest. He's 19. Came to us a couple years back looking for work. He's like a little brother to me. They'll be surprised to see me." "That's putting it mildly." She smiled slightly. "I imagine I'm not the most popular person in this valley." "No, ma'am, you're not." "Good. I prefer honesty to politeness." As they crested the ridge that overlooked Thornridge, Caleb pulled Dusty to a stop. The ranch spread out below them, the buildings looking small and worn against the vast landscape. He could see figures moving in the yard, Pete and Tommy, probably, doing afternoon chores. Marcus would be in the house, watching the window like he always did when Caleb was late returning. "That's home," Caleb said. The widow studied the ranch for a long moment. "It's smaller than I expected, more humble. Most of the valley ranches are like this. Working operations, not show places. And I've been strangling them all." She nudged her horse forward. "Well, let's not delay the inevitable." They descended the ridge trail, taking it slow because of the widow's tired horse. As they got closer, Caleb saw Tommy spot them first. The young man stopped what he was doing and stared, clearly confused about who Caleb was bringing home. Then Pete emerged from the barn, squinting into the afternoon sun. By the time they rode into the yard, Marcus had come out onto the porch. He stood with his arms crossed, his weathered face unreadable. Caleb could feel the tension radiating from the old man, even from a distance. "Caleb," Marcus called as they approached, "you're late. We were starting to worry. Had some trouble at the river. Flash flood came through. You all right?" "Fine. Dusty got us through." Caleb dismounted and helped the widow down from her horse. She stumbled slightly, and he steadied her. "Marcus, we have a guest." The widow removed her muddy hood and looked directly at Marcus Thornridge. For a moment, no one moved. Pete and Tommy had come over from the barn, and they stood frozen when they recognized her. "Mrs. Blackwood," Marcus said finally, his voice flat. "Mr. Thornridge, I apologize for arriving unannounced and in such condition." "What's she doing here?" Pete asked, looking at Caleb. "Long story. Can we go inside?" Marcus didn't move. "I'm not sure what there is to discuss, Mrs. Blackwood. If you've come to deliver foreclosure notices—" "I've come to ask your help," the widow interrupted, "and to begin making amends for 3 years of cruelty." That got Marcus's attention. He studied her face, looking for deception or mockery, but apparently found neither. "Inside, then, but I'll warn you, whatever you're selling, I'm not buying." They filed into the ranch house kitchen, the widow leaving muddy footprints on the floor. Marcus poured coffee for everyone, the silence heavy as stone. Tommy kept glancing between Caleb and the widow, clearly bursting with questions. Pete just watched the old woman with cautious eyes. "Well?" Marcus said, sitting down at the head of the table. "You wanted to talk. Talk." The widow set her waterproof satchel on the table. "First, I need to explain what happened today. Your man here saved my life." She told the story: the flash flood, the wagon breaking apart, Caleb's rescue. She didn't embellish or downplay her own fear. She simply laid out the facts, and when she finished, everyone was looking at Caleb. "You went into that?" Tommy said. "Into a flash flood?" "Wasn't much choice," Caleb replied. "There's always a choice," the widow said. "He chose to save someone he had every reason to hate. That says something about the kind of men you raise here at Thornridge, Mr. Thornridge." Marcus's expression softened slightly. "John raised him right. I just tried not to mess it up too bad. John Stone was a good man. I know that now. I should have known it when he was alive." The widow opened her satchel and drew out the documents. "These are the water deeds for the entire valley. Master copies. They give me control over every spring, every creek, every drop that flows through this watershed." Pete leaned forward. "Why are you showing us this?" "Because I'm going to tear them up." The kitchen went silent. Even the old clock on the wall seemed to stop ticking. "Say that again," Marcus said carefully. "I'm releasing all restrictions on the water rights. Every rancher, every farmer, every homesteader in this valley will have free access to the watershed. No fees, no permits, no restrictions. The water belongs to the valley again, as it should have from the beginning." Tommy let out a whoop, but Marcus held up his hand for silence. "What's the catch?" "No catch, just one request." "Here it comes," Pete muttered. "I need help distributing the access fairly. I've been locked away in my house for 3 years, and I don't know the current situation. I don't know who's barely hanging on and who's already given up. I don't know where the infrastructure is damaged or where new wells need to be dug." She looked around the table. "But you do, all of you. You know this valley and its people. I'm asking you to help me do this right." Marcus sat back in his chair, studying her face. "You're serious about this?" "I've never been more serious about anything in my life." "Why now? Why not 3 years ago?" "Because 3 years ago I was a bitter, angry woman, more interested in revenge than redemption. Today I nearly drowned, and the son of a man I helped kill risked everything to save me." She met Marcus's eyes. "That changes a person, Mr. Thornridge. It makes you see what matters." Marcus looked at Caleb. "This true? About the rescue?" "Yes, sir." "And you trust her?" Caleb thought about the conversation in the shepherd's hut, about the raw honesty in the widow's voice when she'd confessed her crimes. "I think she means what she says." "That's not what I asked." "Yes," Caleb said. Marcus nodded slowly, then turned back to the widow. "All right, I'll help you. Not for your sake, but for the valley. For the families still trying to survive here." He paused. "But I want to see you tear up those deeds right now, before we go any further." The widow smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that." She stood and walked to the old wood stove in the corner. "Mr. Stone, Caleb, would you do the honors? You earned it." She handed him the documents. Caleb looked down at the papers that had represented so much pain, so much loss. His father's face flashed through his mind, and he thought about the broken pocket watch in his vest pocket, stopped forever at 3:47. "This is for you, Dad," he said quietly, and fed the first deed into the stove. The paper caught fire immediately, curling and blackening. One by one, Caleb burned them all, while the others watched in silence. When the last deed was nothing but ash, he closed the stove door and turned back to the table. "It's done," he said. The widow nodded, and for a moment Caleb thought he saw tears in her eyes. "Yes, it's done. Now comes the hard part, earning forgiveness from a valley full of people who have every right to hate me." "One step at a time," Marcus said, standing and offering his hand. "Welcome to Thornridge Ranch, Mrs. Blackwood. I imagine this is the first of many difficult conversations you'll need to have." She took his hand. "I'm ready for them. I have to be." The next morning brought a clear sky and the smell of fresh earth. Caleb woke early, as always, but for the first time in years, He felt something different, not quite hope, but close to it. The deeds were ash, the water was free, everything was about to change. He found Marcus already in the kitchen, coffee brewing, maps spread across the table. The widow had spent the night in the guest room, the first time that room had been used in years, and Marcus had been up since before dawn, planning. "Morning," Marcus said without looking up. "Sleep well?" "Well enough. You?" "Barely. Kept thinking about everything we need to do." He gestured to the maps. "I've marked every ranch in the valley. 23 operations still running, down from 47 3 years ago. Some of these families have been here for generations." Caleb poured himself coffee and studied the maps. Red marks indicated abandoned ranches. Blue marks showed the ones still fighting. It was a sobering picture, more red than blue. "Where do we start?" "That's what we need to figure out. Mrs. Blackwood thinks we should call a valley meeting, get everyone together to announce the changes. I think that's asking for trouble." "Why?" "Because these folks have been suffering for 3 years. Some of them have lost everything. You put them all in a room with the woman who caused it, and I'm not sure what happens. Best case, they shout her down. Worst case," Marcus shook his head, "people do desperate things when they're desperate." The widow's voice came from the doorway. "Then what do you suggest, Mr. Thornridge?" She looked better this morning. Her clothes were still borrowed, one of Marcus's old shirts and a pair of work pants that didn't quite fit, but she'd cleaned up and tied her grey hair back. She looked less like the fearsome Widow Blackwood and more like someone's grandmother. "Good morning," Marcus said, standing. "Coffee, please." Marcus poured and handed her a cup. "I was just telling Caleb that a mass meeting might not be the safest approach. You think they'd hurt me? I think some of them would want to, and I'd rather not find out if they'd actually do it." She sipped her coffee, considering. "What if we went to them? Each ranch, one at a time. Face to face. That's a lot of ranches. I have a lot of sins to answer for." She set down her cup and looked at the maps. "Show me the worst cases, the families barely hanging on. We'll start there." Marcus pointed to a blue mark in the northeast corner. "Harper's Bend. David and Sarah Harper. Lost 2 of their 3 children, both moved to the city looking for work. They're trying to hold on until their youngest finishes school. Another year, maybe 2. And their water situation? They've got 1 well still producing, but it's running dry. Their cattle are down to maybe 20 head from 100. We'll go there first." The widow traced her finger across the map. "What about here? The cluster of 3 ranches along the western ridge. The McCarthy place is one of those," Marcus said quietly. "Thomas McCarthy shot himself there last month. His widow and kids are trying to keep it going, but they won't last much longer." The widow's hand stopped moving. "The man I mentioned yesterday." "That's right." She closed her eyes briefly. "Then that's where we go second. I need to face Mrs. McCarthy. I need to look her in the eye and—" Her voice caught. "I need her to know I'm sorry." "Sorry doesn't bring her husband back," Pete said from the doorway. He'd been listening, apparently. "Sorry doesn't feed her kids or pay her debts." "No, it doesn't," the widow agreed. "But it's a start, and it's all I have to offer right now, that and free access to the water that should have been theirs all along." Pete came into the kitchen and poured himself coffee. "You know what's going to happen, don't you? Word's going to spread. By the time you reach the 5th or 6th ranch, everyone in the valley will know you're making rounds. Could make things harder. Or easier," Caleb said. "If the first few families we visit spread the word about the water rights being released, maybe the others will be more willing to listen. Or they'll think it's a trick," Tommy added, joining them. The kitchen was getting crowded. "No offense, ma'am, but you haven't given these folks much reason to trust you." "None taken. You're absolutely right." The widow straightened. "Which is why I need you all to come with me. You're respected in this valley. If you vouch for me, people might actually listen." Marcus shook his head. "I can't leave the ranch for that long. We've got cattle to tend, fences to repair." "I'll stay," Pete offered. "I can handle things here with a couple of the other hands. You go with her, Marcus. You and Caleb. You're the ones people trust most." Marcus looked at Caleb. "What do you think?" Caleb thought about his father, about all the times John Stone had ridden to the Blackwood estate seeking audience with this woman. Thought about how his father had been turned away each time, how that rejection had eaten at him until his heart gave out. "I think we owe it to everyone my father tried to help," Caleb said. "This is what he wanted, the water free, the valley thriving. If we can make that happen, even with her help, then his death meant something." The widow looked at him, and Caleb saw gratitude in her eyes. "Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This is going to be hard. People are angry. Some of them might never forgive you. I don't expect forgiveness. I just want to make things right, as much as I can." They spent the rest of the morning planning the route. Marcus knew every family, every situation. He explained who was barely hanging on, who'd lost children to the cities, who'd buried family members because of the drought. The widow listened to each story, her face growing paler with each revelation of suffering her policies had caused. "I had no idea it was this bad," she said finally. "I mean, I knew intellectually that people were struggling, but hearing it like this—" She pressed her hand to her mouth. "What have I done?" "What's done is done," Marcus said, not unkindly. "The question now is what we do next. We help them, all of them, however we can. It's not going to be enough. Even with free water, some of these families have debts they can't repay. They've sold off their breeding stock, their equipment. The Harper family, for instance, even if we give them water tomorrow, they don't have the cattle left to make a go of it." The widow was quiet for a moment. "I have money, quite a lot of it, actually. What if—" "No," Marcus interrupted. "That's not what they need. These are proud people. They don't want charity." "Then what?" Caleb had an idea. "What if we did it through the ranch association? Make it a valley-wide initiative. Help families rebuild their herds, share resources, work together instead of competing. Frame it as community support, not handouts." Marcus nodded slowly. "That might work. The old co-op model. We used to do something similar before." He stopped, glancing at the widow. "Before my husband died and I changed everything," she finished. "Yes, I remember. He used to talk about the co-op. He was proud of it. He should have been. It kept the valley strong for 20 years. Then let's bring it back. Whatever it costs, whatever it takes. I'll fund it anonymously if that helps. Just tell me what needs to be done." They worked through lunch, making lists, drawing up plans. Tommy rode out to round up a few of the other ranch hands who could spell Pete while Marcus was away. The widow sent Charles back to her estate with a list of instructions for her lawyer documents to be drawn up, funds to be transferred, legal frameworks to be established. By afternoon, they had a plan. They'd visit 6 ranches over the next 3 days, the most critical situations, the families who needed help immediately. Marcus would lead the conversations, with Caleb there to support him. The widow would listen and answer questions honestly. "What if someone gets violent?" Tommy asked as they were saddling horses. "Then we leave," Marcus said. "I'm not putting anyone in danger, including Mrs. Blackwood." "You could leave me home," the widow said. "Just tell them about the water rights." "No," Caleb said firmly. "If you're serious about making amends, you need to face them. They need to see you, hear you, decide for themselves if you mean what you say." She met his eyes. "You're right. I need to face what I've done." They rode out as the sun was starting to descend, Marcus, Caleb, and the widow, with 2 spare horses carrying supplies and documents. The widow had changed into riding clothes borrowed from Marcus's late wife, found in a trunk in the attic. They were outdated but serviceable. As they rode, Caleb found himself watching the widow. She sat her horse well, better than he'd expected. She kept her eyes on the horizon, her jaw set with determination. This was a woman preparing for battle, he realized, not a physical one, but maybe something harder, a battle for redemption that she knew she might not win. "First stop is Harper's Bend," Marcus called back. "About 2 hours' ride." The widow nodded. "Then let's not waste time. The sooner we start, the sooner we can begin making things right." They rode on through the afternoon, 3 unlikely allies, heading into uncertain territory. Behind them, the sun cast long shadows across Thornridge Ranch. Ahead, the valley waited angry, suffering, desperate for the change they carried with them. Caleb reached into his vest and felt the broken pocket watch. 3:47. The time his father's heart stopped. But maybe, just maybe, it was also the time when things started to heal. Harper's Bend sat in a small valley carved out by a creek that hadn't run in 2 years. The ranch buildings were weathered and sagging, paint long gone from the wood. A single windmill creaked in the breeze, drawing water from a well that Marcus said was nearly dry. A handful of cattle grazed on scrubland that used to be rich pasture. As they rode up the long drive, Caleb saw a woman step out onto the porch, Sarah Harper. He'd known her his whole life. She used to bring cookies to the ranch when he was young. Now she looked 20 years older than her actual age, her face lined with worry and exhaustion. She recognized Marcus first. Her posture relaxed slightly, then tensed again when she saw the widow. "Marcus Thornridge," she called out. "This is unexpected." They dismounted, and Marcus walked forward slowly, hands visible. "Sarah, good to see you. This is Caleb Stone." "I know Caleb. Watched him grow up." Her eyes shifted to the widow. "And I know who she is too. What's going on here?" "Marcus, we need to talk to you and David. Is he around?" "In the barn. I'll get him." She disappeared inside without inviting them to wait on the porch. The widow stayed back with the horses while Marcus and Caleb stood in the yard. Caleb could feel the tension radiating from her. This was the moment of truth, the first test of whether her words would mean anything to the people she'd hurt. David Harper emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on his pants. He was a tall man, stooped now with the weight of 3 years' struggle. When he saw the widow, his face hardened. "What's she doing here?" "David," Marcus said calmly, "I need you to listen, both of you. What we have to say is important." "Important? My kids left because there's no future here, my herd's dying, my well's going dry. If she's come to gloat—" "She's come to make things right," Caleb interrupted, "or to try anyway." Sarah had returned with a rifle, not aimed at anyone, but clearly ready. "Go on then. Say what you came to say." Marcus gestured for the widow to step forward. She did, keeping her hands visible, her voice steady despite the rifle. "Mr. and Mrs. Harper, my name is Catherine Blackwood. You know me as the widow who's been controlling the water rights in this valley." "We know you," David said. "You're the reason we're about to lose everything my father built." "You're right. I am. And I'm here to tell you that I've released all restrictions on the water rights. As of yesterday, every family in this valley has free access to the watershed. No fees, no permits, no limitations." The rifle lowered slightly. "What's the catch?" Sarah asked. "No catch. The water is yours, as it should have been from the beginning. My husband's intention was always to share the resource fairly. After he died, her voice caught. I let my anger control me. I punished this valley for something that wasn't its fault. And I'm here to tell you I'm sorry." David and Sarah looked at each other, some silent communication passing between them. "Sorry doesn't bring back our kids," David said. "Sorry doesn't repay 3 years of lost income." "No, it doesn't. You're absolutely right. But it's a start, and it's accompanied by action. The water deeds have been destroyed. I've instructed my lawyer to formalize the new access rights. Within a week, you'll have legal documentation giving you unlimited water access in perpetuity." "How do we know this isn't some trick?" Sarah asked. Marcus stepped forward. "Because I watched her burn the deeds myself, in my kitchen, in my stove. They're gone, Sarah. This is real. And there's more," the widow continued. "I'm working with Marcus and the Valley Ranchers to re-establish the old co-op, pool resources, share costs, help families rebuild their herds. If you're willing to participate, there will be funds available to help you restock your cattle and repair your infrastructure." David's expression was skeptical. "Why now? Why after 3 years of nothing?" The widow looked at Caleb. "Because your neighbor here risked his life to save mine yesterday. He pulled me from a flash flood that would have killed me, even though he had every reason to let me drown. That act of courage made me see what I'd become and what this valley still could be. Sarah set the rifle aside. Caleb saved you? He did. From the red clay river, the flood destroyed my wagon, and he rode into the water to pull me out. The widow's voice was soft now. I was on my way to see the drought damage for myself. I needed to face what my policies had done. And then I ended up facing the son of a man whose death I caused, and he chose mercy over revenge. There was a long silence. Finally, David spoke. John Stone's boy. Yes, Caleb said. Your father was a good man, tried to help us all when things first went bad. I'm sorry he didn't live to see this day. So am I. But I think he'd want me to help finish what he started. David walked closer, studying the widow's face. You really mean this? The water's free? I give you my word, and I'll put it in writing with Marcus as witness, whatever it takes for you to believe me. Sarah came down from the porch. Our well's nearly dry. We've been hauling water from the old creek bed, what little pools are left. The cattle, her voice broke. We've lost so many. Starting tomorrow, you can draw from any source you need, the widow said. The flash flood yesterday opened up the red clay again. It won't last, but it'll help in the short term. And Marcus knows where the deepest springs are. We'll help you dig new wells if needed. Why should we trust you? Because I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm asking you to trust Marcus and Caleb. They're the ones who verified this is real. I'm just the vehicle for making it happen. David looked at Marcus. This is legitimate? You trust her? I trust that she knows she can't undo the past, but she's trying to make a better future. And I trust that the water rights are truly released. I saw the documents burn. David took a deep breath, looking at his wife. She nodded slightly. All right, he said. We'll try. God knows we don't have much choice, but if this is some kind of game, it's not. You have my word, Mr. Harper. They spent the next hour going over details where the Harpers could access water, what the co-op would provide, how the legal documentation would be delivered. The widow took notes, asked questions, and listened to their struggles without making excuses. When they finally prepared to leave, Sarah stopped them. Mrs. Blackwood, Catherine, I don't forgive you. Not yet, maybe not ever. But I'm willing to see if you mean what you say. That's all I can ask for. As they rode away from Harper's Bend, Caleb saw the widow wipe her eyes. That was harder than I expected. That was one of the easier conversations you're going to have, Marcus said. The Harpers are reasonable people. Wait until we get to the McCarthy place. How far? 2 hours. We'll be there by sunset. They rode in silence, each lost in thought. Caleb kept replaying the conversation, looking for mistakes or missed opportunities. The Harpers hadn't been warm, but they'd listened. That was something. Thank you, the widow said after a while. For what? Caleb asked. For not letting me face that alone. For standing beside me when you had no reason to. She looked at him. Your father would be proud. Caleb touched his vest pocket, feeling the broken watch. I hope so. The sun was lowering as they approached the McCarthy ranch. Caleb could see the barn where Thomas McCarthy had ended his life, and his stomach tightened. This was going to be brutal. Marcus raised his hand to stop them on the ridge overlooking the property. Sarah Harper was angry. Margaret McCarthy might be something worse. You ready for this? The widow straightened in her saddle. No, but we're doing it anyway. They rode down toward the ranch as the sun touched the horizon, casting long shadows across the yard where 3 children played, not knowing their future had just changed one way or another. Margaret McCarthy didn't come out when they rode up. Instead, her eldest daughter, a girl of maybe 16, appeared on the porch with a shotgun. She held it like someone who knew how to use it. Turn around, the girl said. You're not welcome here. Emma, Marcus called out gently. It's Marcus Thornridge. Is your mother home? I know who you are, Mr. Thornridge, and I know who she is. The girl's eyes fixed on the widow with pure hatred. She killed my father. Get her off our land. A woman's voice came from inside the house. Emma, lower the gun. Margaret McCarthy emerged, looking hollow. She'd been a vibrant woman once. Caleb remembered her laughing at a barn dance years ago. Now she looked like a ghost of herself. "Mrs. McCarthy," Marcus began, "we need to talk to you." "About what? About how she's sorry? About how she didn't mean for my husband to put a bullet in his head?" Margaret's voice was cold. "Save your breath, Marcus. Nothing she can say will bring Thomas back." The widow dismounted slowly, hands visible. "You're right, Mrs. McCarthy. Nothing I say will undo what I've done. But I've come to tell you that I've released all restrictions on the water rights. The valley has free access again." "Too late. My husband is dead." "I know, and I'm responsible for that." The widow took a step forward. "I came to tell you myself because you deserve to hear it from me. You deserve to look me in the eye and see that I know what I've done." Margaret laughed bitterly. "You want absolution? Go to a priest. Don't come to me. I don't want absolution. I want you to know that the water that was killing this ranch is yours now, free and clear, and I want to help you and your children rebuild." "With what? Guilt money?" "With whatever it takes. The co-op is being re-established. Your children won't have to give up their father's legacy because of my cruelty." Emma still had the shotgun raised. "Mother, just let me—" "No." Margaret held up her hand. "Lower it." "Emma." The girl reluctantly complied, though her eyes never left the widow. Margaret walked down into the yard, stopping a few feet from the widow. They stood facing each other, two women separated by grief and guilt. "I was there when he did it," Margaret said quietly. "In the kitchen. I heard the shot. I ran to the barn and found him." Her voice broke. "Do you know what that's like? Finding the man you love with half his head gone?" The widow's face crumbled. "No, but I know what it's like to be so consumed by anger that you destroy innocent lives. I know what it's like to wake up and realize you've become a monster. A realization that came 3 years too late. Yes, 3 years, dozens of families, and one young man's courage too late." They stood in silence, and Caleb felt the weight of the moment. This wasn't about deals or documents. This was about two women facing the reality of irreversible loss. Then a rider appeared on the ridge behind them, galloping hard. Caleb recognized the horse, one of the Thornridge mounts. It was Tommy, and he was riding like the devil was chasing him. "Marcus!" Tommy shouted as he thundered into the yard. "Marcus, we've got trouble." Marcus ran to meet him. "What is it?" "It's Charles, ma'am." Tommy looked at the widow. "Your driver. He came back to the ranch maybe an hour after you left. He was asking Pete questions, where you'd gone, who you were meeting with, what you'd said about the water rights." "What kind of questions?" the widow asked, walking over. "Specific ones. Like he was gathering information for someone." Tommy pulled a piece of paper from his pocket. "Then this came by telegraph to the general store. Mrs. Henderson sent her boy to the ranch with it. It's addressed to you, ma'am, but Pete thought you should see it right away." The widow took the paper and read it. Her face went pale. "What is it?" Caleb asked. She handed him the telegram. It was from her lawyer in the city. "Catherine, stop. Your foreman Garrett claims you are mentally unfit. Stop. Has filed petition with county court to assume control of estate citing incompetence. Stop. Hearing scheduled 3 days. Stop. Advise immediately. Stop. Your foreman's trying to take control?" Marcus said, reading over Caleb's shoulder. "Garrett has been managing the estate since my husband died. I trusted him completely." The widow's hand shook. "Charles must have sent word to him about what I was doing, about destroying the deeds." "So he's claiming you're crazy?" Caleb said. "That you didn't know what you were doing?" "If he succeeds, he'll have power of attorney over the entire estate, including the water rights." The widow sat down hard on the ground, as if her legs wouldn't hold her anymore. "Oh God, the deeds. You burned them," Marcus said. "They're gone. The master copies are gone. But there are registry copies at the county office. If Garrett gets control before we can legally formalize the release, he can reinstate all the restrictions. Or worse, he can sell the rights to the highest bidder." The implications hit Caleb like a physical blow. The land consortium. Harper mentioned they've been buying up properties. Garrett has been talking to them for months, the widow said. I thought he was just exploring options in case I ever decided to sell. But if he's been planning this... She looked up at Marcus. He's been waiting for me to make a mistake. And I gave him exactly what he needed when I destroyed those deeds. Margaret McCarthy spoke up. How long until the hearing? 3 days, the telegram says. And where is it? County seat. 2 days' ride from here. Then you need to go. Now. The widow looked at her in surprise. Mrs. McCarthy, I still hate you. I probably always will. But I'll hate you a lot more if you let some scheming foreman steal back what you just gave us. Margaret's jaw was set. Emma, get fresh horses from the barn. Marcus, you'll need supplies for a hard ride. Why are you helping me? The widow asked. I'm not helping you. I'm protecting my children's future. If this Garrett person gets control, we're right back where we started. At least with you, there's a chance things actually change. Caleb's mind was racing. 2 days to the county seat, and they'd need to arrive with enough time to prepare for the hearing. That meant leaving tonight and riding hard. We'll need proof, Marcus said. Proof that she was of sound mind when she released the rights. We have witnesses, Caleb said. Everyone who saw her at Thornridge, the Harpers. Who've never met her before yesterday. A lawyer will tear that apart. Marcus rubbed his face. We need something stronger. The widow stood, brushing dirt from her borrowed clothes. We need the original registry documents from the county office. If I can show that I accessed them recently, that I was engaged with the management of the water rights, it proves I understood what I was doing. Will they release them? Not without a court order. Not if Garrett's already filed his petition. She looked at Caleb. Unless someone retrieves them before Garrett knows we're coming. You're talking about stealing official documents, Marcus said. I'm talking about protecting what's rightfully being given back to this valley. The widow's voice was firm now, the shock wearing off into determination. Garrett has had 3 years to rob these families. I won't let him have 3 more days. Tommy spoke up. I can ride ahead, get there tomorrow night, scout things out. Too dangerous, Marcus said. I'm the fastest rider here, and no one knows me in the county seat. I can get in and out without raising suspicion. The boy's right, Margaret said, and you'll need more than just the 3 of you anyway. Emma, saddle your horse. You're going with them. Mother, you wanted to help this family. This is how. You're my witness that Mrs. Blackwood was coherent, intentional, and determined to right her wrongs. If anyone questions her sanity, you tell them what you saw here today. Emma looked at the shotgun she'd been holding, then at her mother, then at the widow. All right, but if this is a trick... It's not a trick. I promise you. The widow turned to Caleb. Caleb thought about his father, about the broken watch in his pocket, about every family in the valley that had suffered. It became our fight the moment you burned those deeds. We're not letting someone steal this back. Then we ride tonight, Marcus said. Caleb, you and I will go with Mrs. Blackwood to the county seat. Tommy, you leave now, get there ahead of us and figure out where those registry documents are kept. Emma, you're with us as a witness. What about me? Margaret asked. Spread the word. Tell every ranch we didn't get to visit what's happening. If this goes to court, we'll need as many people there as possible to testify to the widow's state of mind. Margaret nodded. Consider it done. And Mrs. Blackwood, don't make me regret this. I won't. I swear it. Within the hour, they were riding hard through the darkness. 5 people who'd been strangers or enemies just days ago, now united against a common threat. The widow rode in the middle of the group, her face set with determination. Caleb rode beside her, and once, when they stopped to rest the horses, she turned to him. I thought destroying those deeds would be the hard part. I didn't realize it was just the beginning. Nothing worth doing is ever easy, Caleb said. My father used to tell me that. He was right. She looked up at the stars. I hope we get there in time. We will. We have to. They rode on through the night, racing against time and treachery, carrying the hopes of a valley on their shoulders. They rode through the night, stopping only to rest the horses and grab a few hours of sleep. Emma proved to be as tough as her mother, never complaining despite the grueling pace. The widow rode with the same determination, though Caleb could see the exhaustion creeping into her features. By mid-morning of the second day, they reached the outskirts of Silver Creek, the county seat. It was a proper town, 2-story buildings lining a main street, a courthouse with white columns, a bank, a telegraph office. Very different from the scattered ranches of the valley. Tommy was waiting for them at a boarding house on the edge of town. He looked tired but alert. "I got here just before dawn," he said, leading them inside to a private room. "Spent the morning asking questions, listening to gossip. It's worse than we thought." "Tell us," Marcus said, settling into a chair. "Garrett arrived yesterday with 3 lawyers from the city. They've been meeting with Judge Harrison, and word is the hearing's been moved up to tomorrow morning instead of in 3 days." The widow closed her eyes. "He's trying to push it through before I can mount a defense." "That's not all. He's brought witnesses, people who'll testify that you've been acting strangely for months. Your housekeeper, your gardener, even your personal physician." "My physician, Dr. Morrison, would never." "He's claiming you've been refusing medical treatment, talking about seeing your dead husband, giving away valuable property without consideration." Tommy pulled out a notebook. "I wrote down what I heard. It's bad, ma'am." Caleb felt his anger rising. "He's paying them to lie. Maybe, or maybe he's been laying groundwork for this for a long time, planting seeds about her mental state." Marcus looked at the widow. "Have you been refusing medical treatment?" "I have arthritis. Morrison wants me to take laudanum for the pain. I refused because it makes me foggy." She stood and paced. "And yes, I talk to my late husband sometimes. In private. Is that so strange?" "It is when someone's building a case that you're incompetent," Marcus said gently. "What about the registry documents?" Caleb asked Tommy. "They're in the county recorder's office, in the courthouse basement. There's a clerk on duty during the day, but the office closes at 5. After that, there's just a watchman who makes rounds every hour. Security? Lock on the door. But it's an old building. The windows in the basement are at ground level in the back alley." Marcus shook his head. "We're not breaking into the courthouse. We don't have a choice." The widow said, "Those documents prove I've been actively managing the water rights. They show dates, signatures, my clear understanding of the system. Without them, it's my word against Garrett's coached witnesses. If we get caught, then we get caught. But I won't sit by and watch him steal what I just gave back to the valley." Emma spoke up. "There might be another way. What if we get the county recorder to show us the documents officially? We have a right to see them, don't we?" "Not without authorization from the estate," Tommy said, "and Garrett's claiming he's the authorized representative now because of the widow's incompetence." "Then we need to prove she's competent before the hearing," Caleb said. "Get our own witnesses, our own testimony." "Who's going to believe testimony from ranchers she's been oppressing?" Marcus countered. "Garrett will say we're biased, that we're taking advantage of a confused old woman." The widow bristled. "I'm neither confused nor that old." Despite the tension, Caleb almost smiled. "Then we need someone who can't be dismissed as biased, someone respected, official, who can evaluate you independently." "A doctor," Emma said. "A different doctor, not Morrison." "There's a Dr. Fletcher in town," Tommy offered. "He's been here 30 years, delivered half the babies in the county. People trust him." "Would he see me on short notice? For the Widow Blackwood?" "Probably. Everyone in town's talking about the hearing tomorrow. This is big news." Marcus stood. "All right. Here's what we do. Mrs. Blackwood goes to see Dr. Fletcher this afternoon, gets a competency evaluation. The rest of us spread out, talk to townspeople, see if anyone has information about Garrett's dealings. There's got to be someone who knows something." "What about the registry documents?" the widow asked. "We try the official route first. I'll go to the recorder's office, see if I can at least view them, even if I can't take them. Maybe that's enough." They divided up and headed into town. Caleb went with the widow to Dr. Fletcher's office, a neat building near the courthouse. The doctor was an older man with kind eyes and a careful manner. "Mrs. Blackwood," he said, inviting them into his examination room, "I've been expecting someone from your party." "You have?" "Mr. Garrett came to see me 2 days ago, asked if I'd be willing to examine you and provide testimony about your mental state." The widow's face fell. "And you agreed?" "I told him I'd need to examine you first, before making any such commitment." He didn't like that answer. Dr. Fletcher gestured to a chair. "Please sit, let's talk." For the next hour, the doctor asked questions about her health, her daily routines, her decisions regarding the water rights. He tested her memory, her reasoning, her understanding of legal and financial matters. The widow answered everything clearly and directly. Finally, Dr. Fletcher sat back. "Mrs. Blackwood, I see absolutely no evidence of mental incompetence. You're sharp, articulate, and fully aware of the implications of your actions. You'll testify to that?" "I will. Though I should warn you, Garrett has 3 witnesses, and they've had time to coordinate their stories. My testimony will help, but it might not be enough." "It has to be enough. The alternative is unthinkable." Back at the boarding house that evening, they compared notes. Marcus had been allowed to view the registry documents, but not copy or remove them. Tommy had learned that Garrett was staying at the expensive hotel on Main Street and had been hosting dinners for local officials. Emma had talked to shopkeepers and learned that Garrett had been buying supplies for the Blackwood estate in bulk, suggesting he'd been planning to take control for some time. "He's been preparing for this for months," the widow said, staring at the notes spread across the table. "Probably since the moment I started questioning how the estate was being run." "When was that?" Caleb asked. 6 months ago. I asked to see the account books, wanted to understand where the money was going. He showed me, but I noticed discrepancies. Small things at first, invoices that seemed high, contracts with vendors I'd never heard of. I started asking more questions. "And he realized you were catching on to whatever scheme he was running," Marcus said. "So he started building a case for incompetence, making sure he'd have an escape route when I figured it out." The widow's hands clenched. "I've been such a fool." "You trusted someone you thought was loyal," Caleb said. "That's not foolish. It is when that trust costs an entire valley 3 more years of suffering." There was a knock at the door. Tommy opened it to reveal a young woman Caleb didn't recognize. She was well-dressed, nervous, glancing over her shoulder. "I need to speak with Mrs. Blackwood," she said quietly. "It's about Garrett." They ushered her inside. She introduced herself as Helen Pierce, one of Garrett's assistants at the estate. "I know what he's been doing," she said, addressing the widow directly. "The financial irregularities you noticed? He's been skimming from the estate for years. Small amounts at first, then larger. He's got a house in the city, investments all purchased with your money." "Can you prove it?" "I have ledgers. The real ones, not the ones he shows you. I've been keeping them hidden, documenting everything, because I knew someday." She swallowed hard. "I'm sorry I didn't come forward sooner. I was afraid of losing my position." "Why come forward now?" "Because he's going too far. Taking control of the entire estate through legal trickery, ruining your reputation to cover his theft. It's wrong. And when I heard what you were trying to do with the water rights, I realized you're not the person he's been making you out to be." The widow took the ledgers Helen offered. They were detailed, meticulous years of theft, documented in careful handwriting. "This changes everything," Marcus said. "With these, we can show Garrett's motivation for wanting control. It's not about your competence, it's about covering his crimes." "Will the judge accept them?" Emma asked. "If we present them properly. With Helen's testimony, yes." The widow looked at the young woman. "You know what this means for you. Garrett will know you betrayed him." "I know, but it's the right thing to do." And Helen hesitated. "My father lost his ranch 3 years ago because of the water restrictions. He died last year. If this helps restore the valley, it's worth whatever happens to me." Caleb felt a surge of respect for this woman who was risking everything to stand up to corruption. They spent the rest of the evening preparing. Marcus and the widow went over her testimony, anticipating questions. Emma reviewed what she'd witnessed at the McCarthy ranch. Tommy mapped out the courthouse layout in case they needed to move quickly. And Caleb read through Helen's ledgers, familiarizing himself with the evidence of Garrett's theft. As midnight approached, Caleb stepped outside for air. The widow joined him, wrapped in a shawl against the night chill. "Thank you," she said, "for everything. For saving my life, for believing I could change, for standing with me through this. We're not done yet. I know. Tomorrow is going to be difficult." Caleb looked up at the stars, the same stars his father used to point out on clear nights. "My father used to say that the hardest fights are the ones most worth fighting." He sounds like he was a wise man. He was. And he'd be proud of what you're doing, not just releasing the water rights, but facing the consequences of your past actions, fighting to make things right. The widow was quiet for a moment. "I hope you're right. I hope all of this is worth something in the end." "It will be. One way or another, tomorrow changes everything." They stood together in the darkness, two unlikely allies preparing for the battle ahead. Inside the boarding house, the others were settling in for a few hours of sleep before the hearing. But Caleb knew sleep wouldn't come easy for any of them. Tomorrow, in a courthouse full of strangers, they would fight for the future of the valley. And failure wasn't an option. The courthouse was packed. Word had spread through the county, and it seemed like half the valley had shown up. Caleb saw faces he recognized, ranchers who'd given up and moved away, families still struggling to survive, townspeople curious about the spectacle. In the front row sat Garrett, flanked by his 3 lawyers, looking confident and smug. The widow entered through the main doors, and the room went silent. She wore her own clothes now, retrieved from the estate by Helen, a simple but elegant dress that spoke of dignity and authority. She walked with her head high, refusing to show any fear. Judge Harrison was an older man, with a reputation for fairness, but also for strict adherence to the law. He gavelled the room to order and read the petition. "We're here to determine the mental competence of Catherine Blackwood and whether control of her estate should be transferred to her foreman, Mr. Garrett, under conservatorship. Mr. Garrett, you may call your first witness." Garrett's lead lawyer, a slick man named Pemberton, stood. "Your Honor, we call Dr. Morrison." The widow's physician took the stand and swore his oath. Under questioning, he testified that the widow had been refusing medical treatment, showing signs of confusion and exhibiting erratic behavior. "Can you give us specific examples?" Pemberton asked. "She speaks to her deceased husband as if he were present. She's given away valuable property, the water rights, without any apparent consideration or rational planning. She's refused medication that would help her think more clearly." Marcus whispered to their lawyer, a local attorney named Simmons they'd hired that morning. Simmons stood. "Objection, Your Honor. The witness is characterizing normal grief behavior as evidence of incompetence, and he's misrepresenting the widow's decisions as irrational when they were, in fact, carefully considered." Sustained. "Dr. Morrison, please stick to medical observations, not legal conclusions." The examination continued, but the damage was done. Morrison's testimony painted a picture of a woman losing touch with reality. Next came the housekeeper, who testified about finding the widow in her late husband's study, talking as if he were there. Then the gardener, who claimed she'd been giving contradictory instructions and forgetting conversations. Caleb watched Garrett during the testimony. The man sat calm and composed, occasionally nodding or making notes. He looked like someone who'd already won. When it was their turn, Simmons called Dr. Fletcher first. The respected town physician testified that he'd examined the widow thoroughly and found her completely competent, sharp, rational, and fully aware of her decisions and their implications. "In your professional opinion, Doctor, is Mrs. Blackwood capable of managing her own affairs?" "Absolutely. I found no evidence of dementia, confusion, or impaired judgment. She's grieving, yes, But grief is not incompetence. Pemberton's cross-examination was brutal. "Doctor, you examined Mrs. Blackwood for 1 hour. Dr. Morrison has been her physician for 10 years. Who do you think has a better understanding of her mental state?" "I base my conclusions on medical evidence, not duration of acquaintance. But you can't rule out that she might have been having a particularly good day when you saw her, can you?" Fletcher had to admit he couldn't. Simmons called Emma next. The young woman took the stand nervously but spoke clearly about what she'd witnessed, the widow's coherent explanation of the water rights, her understanding of the impact of her past decisions, her determination to make amends. "She knew exactly what she was doing," Emma testified. "She wasn't confused or manipulated. She was clear-headed and purposeful." "Miss McCarthy," Pemberton said during cross-examination, "your father died recently, didn't he? And didn't he blame the water restrictions for his financial troubles?" "Yes." "So you have every reason to want those restrictions lifted, don't you? Every reason to claim Mrs. Blackwood was competent when she gave away property worth millions?" "I'm telling the truth." "Or you're telling what you want to be true because it benefits you." Emma's face flushed, but she held firm. "My father died because he had no hope left. Mrs. Blackwood gave us back that hope. I'm not lying about what I saw." Marcus was called next, and his testimony carried more weight. He explained his decades of experience in the valley, his knowledge of water rights and estate management, and his careful observation of the widow's behavior and decisions. "She understood completely what she was doing," Marcus stated. "She was clear about her past mistakes and determined to correct them. That's not incompetence, Your Honor. That's wisdom." But then Pemberton produced the telegram from the widow's lawyer, the one that had alerted them to the hearing. "Mr. Thornridge, were you present when Mrs. Blackwood destroyed the master copies of the water rights deeds?" "I was." "And she did this impulsively, didn't she? Without consulting lawyers, without proper documentation, just threw them into a stove and burned them?" "Yes or no, Mr. Thornridge? Did she destroy irreplaceable legal documents worth millions of dollars in a wood stove?" Marcus's jaw tightened. "Yes." No further questions. The morning session ended badly. Caleb could see it in Judge Harrison's face, the doubt creeping in, the concern that maybe the widow had acted rashly, irresponsibly. They broke for lunch, and the group gathered in an empty courtroom down the hall. "We're losing," Emma said quietly. "Not yet," the widow replied, though her voice was strained. "We still have Helen's testimony this afternoon. And the ledgers." "Garrett's lawyers will attack her credibility," Simmons warned. "They'll say she's a disgruntled employee." "Then we need something stronger," Caleb said. "Something they can't explain away." The widow looked at him. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking it's time to stop playing defense. We need to go on the attack. Show the judge why Garrett really wants control." "The embezzlement evidence?" "More than that. We need to show his pattern of manipulation, his planning. Make the judge see that this whole competency claim is just a cover for theft." Simmons nodded slowly. "It's risky. If we accuse Garrett of crimes, we better be able to prove it." "We can prove it," Helen said from the doorway. She'd been waiting outside. "I have everything we need." "Then let's show them," the widow said, straightening her shoulders. "Let's finish this." The afternoon session started with tension thick in the air. Garrett noticed Helen sitting with the widow's group, and his confident expression faltered for just a moment before he recovered. Simmons stood. "Your Honor, we call Helen Pierce to the stand." Pemberton objected immediately. "This witness isn't on the list provided this morning. She came forward with critical information, Your Honor, information directly relevant to this proceeding." Judge Harrison considered. "I'll allow it. Proceed." Helen took the stand, her hands trembling slightly as she swore her oath, but when Simmons began questioning her, her voice was steady. "Miss Pierce, what is your relationship to the petitioner, Mr. Garrett?" "I've been his assistant for 5 years, managing records and correspondence for the Blackwood estate." "And in that capacity, you've had access to financial records?" "Yes, sir, all of them." Simmons handed her the ledgers. Can you identify these documents? These are the true accounting records for the estate, the ones Mr. Garrett keeps separate from what he shows Mrs. Blackwood. The courtroom erupted. Judge Harrison gavelled for silence while Garrett leaned over to whisper furiously to Pemberton. "Your Honor," Pemberton protested, "this is outrageous. We're here to determine Mrs. Blackwood's competence, not to entertain wild accusations." "I'll determine what's relevant, Mr. Pemberton. Continue, Mr. Simmons." "Miss Pierce, what do these records show?" "Systematic embezzlement over 6 years. Mr. Garrett has been inflating expenses, creating false vendor accounts, and siphoning money from the estate. The total is approximately $300,000. The number hung in the air. Even Judge Harrison looked shocked. "And you can substantiate this?" "Every entry is documented. Purchase orders, invoices, bank transfers. I've been keeping records because I knew something was wrong, but I didn't know what to do about it until now." Pemberton's cross-examination was aggressive. "Miss Pierce, isn't it true that you were recently denied a raise by Mr. Garrett?" "Yes." "And isn't this testimony just revenge for that denial?" "No, I kept these records long before that. I kept them because what he was doing was wrong. Or perhaps you kept them to blackmail him later." "If I wanted to blackmail him, I would have done it privately, not in open court." Pemberton shifted tactics. "These so-called discrepancies, couldn't they simply be accounting errors? Differences in bookkeeping methods? Not when the money ends up in Mr. Garrett's personal accounts." That stopped Pemberton cold. "You have proof of that?" "Bank statements. Subpoena his records, Your Honor. You'll see deposits matching the amounts missing from the estate." Judge Harrison leaned forward. "Mr. Garrett, do you wish to respond to these allegations?" Garrett stood, his composure cracking. "Your Honor, this is a distraction. We're here because Mrs. Blackwood has shown herself incapable of managing her affairs. Whatever financial questions exist can be addressed separately." "I think they're very much related," the judge interrupted. "If these allegations are true, they suggest your petition may be motivated by something other than concern for Mrs. Blackwood's welfare. They're lies. Then you won't mind if we examine your financial records." The room went silent. Garrett looked at his lawyers, who were frantically whispering among themselves. Finally, Pemberton stood. "Your Honor, we request a continuance to investigate these claims." Denied. "We're going to resolve this today." Judge Harrison turned to Simmons. "Do you have additional witnesses?" "Just one, Your Honor. We call Mrs. Catherine Blackwood." The widow took the stand with the same dignity she'd shown all day. Simmons led her through her testimony, her reasons for releasing the water rights, her understanding of the legal and financial implications, her awareness of what she was giving up. "Mrs. Blackwood, did anyone pressure you into destroying the water deeds?" "No one. It was entirely my decision." "Did you understand what you were doing?" "Completely. I was correcting 3 years of cruelty and giving back what should never have been taken." "And now that you know Mr. Garrett was embezzling from your estate, does that change your decision about the water rights?" "Not at all. The water rights decision was about making amends to the valley. Garrett's theft is a separate matter, and yes, I'll be pursuing it to the fullest extent of the law." Pemberton's cross-examination was half-hearted. The momentum had shifted completely. Judge Harrison called for a brief recess to review the evidence. When he returned, his expression was grave. "I've reviewed the ledgers Miss Pierce provided and compared them to the official estate records. The discrepancies are significant and troubling. Mr. Garrett, I'm ordering a full audit of the Blackwood estate and freezing your access to any estate funds pending investigation." Garrett's face went white. "As for the matter of Mrs. Blackwood's competence," the judge continued, "I find no evidence of mental incapacity. Her decisions may be unconventional, but they're rational and clearly articulated. The petition for conservatorship is denied." The courtroom erupted in cheers. Ranchers who'd come from the valley stood and applauded. Emma hugged her mother, who'd arrived during the lunch break. Marcus shook Simmons's hand vigorously. Caleb looked at the widow, who sat very still, tears streaming down her face. Not tears of relief exactly, but something deeper, maybe the first tears she'd allowed herself in years. Garrett tried to leave through the side door, but the bailiff stopped him. "Sir, the judge wants you to remain available for questioning." As they filed out of the courthouse, the widow was surrounded by people, some thanking her, some still angry but willing to listen, all of them wanting to know what came next. "What happens now?" Tommy asked Caleb. Caleb watched the widow patiently answering questions, accepting both gratitude and criticism with equal grace. "Now," he said, "the real work begins." 3 months later, Caleb stood on the ridge overlooking Thornridge Ranch and marveled at the transformation. The winter rains had been generous, and the valley was green again, not the desperate, fleeting green of a brief shower, but the deep, sustainable green of a healthy watershed. The creek beds ran full, the cattle were fat, and everywhere he looked, he saw signs of life returning. Below, he could see the work crews finishing the new well house. The Valley Co-op had rebuilt in earnest, with 21 ranches now participating. The McCarthy place was thriving under Margaret and Emma's management, with new breeding stock purchased through the co-op fund. The Harpers had their children back home, both of them working to rebuild what had almost been lost. Dusty nickered softly, and Caleb patted the horse's neck. "We did it, boy. Dad would be proud." He pulled out the pocket watch, and for the first time in 2 years, he wound it. The mechanism clicked and caught, and the hands began to move, not frozen at 3:47 anymore, time moving forward again, as it should. "I thought I might find you up here." Caleb turned to see the widow riding up the trail. She looked different now, healthier, lighter somehow, as if setting down years of guilt had let her breathe again. She still lived in the big house on the bluff, but she was down in the valley more days than not, working alongside the ranchers she'd once opposed. "Beautiful view," she said, pulling her horse alongside his. "Best in the valley. My father used to bring me up here when I was young. He'd point out every ranch, tell me their stories, who was struggling, who was thriving. He loved this place. He did, and he'd be amazed to see it now." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun sink toward the western hills. The valley spread before them, dotted with ranches, showing signs of renewal, new buildings, repaired fences, herds increasing. "I got word from the prosecutor yesterday," the widow said. "Garrett pleaded guilty to embezzlement and fraud. He'll spend 5 years in prison." "Good. He earned it. Helen's been promoted to estate manager. She's doing a wonderful job, and I trust her completely. It's strange in trying to destroy me. Garrett actually helped me find someone truly worthy of that position." "How's the legal documentation going?" "Final papers are being filed next week. Every ranch in the valley will have iron-clad water rights, recorded and protected. No one can ever take them away again. Your father's dream, realized at last." Caleb felt the weight of those words. He'd say it was about time. "I've been thinking about something," the widow said. "The valley needs a new name for the water management system. I was thinking we could call it the Stone Blackwood Compact, after your father and my husband, the 2 men who actually understood what this resource meant. I think Dad would like that. There's something else." She reached into her saddlebag and pulled out a leather-bound journal. "I've been writing everything down, the whole story. My husband's death, my years of anger, the drought, your rescue, all of it. I want people to know what happened here. I want them to understand how easily good intentions can turn to cruelty, and how it's never too late to choose differently." "Are you going to publish it?" "Eventually. But first, I wanted you to read it. Make sure I got your father's story right. Make sure I'm telling the truth, not a version that makes me look better than I deserve." Caleb took the journal. "I'll read it." "Thank you." "And Caleb," she hesitated, "I know I can never make up for what I did to your father, but I hope that what we've built together here means something. I hope it counts for something. It counts for everything. The valley's alive again. Families are staying instead of leaving. Kids are growing up with a future to look forward to." He met her eyes. "You can't undo the past, but you've made a better future possible. That's what matters." The widow nodded, blinking back tears. "Your father raised a remarkable son. My father and Marcus both, and Pete and a dozen other people who taught me that doing the right thing matters, even when it's hard." Down at the ranch, Caleb could see activity: Marcus directing the placement of new equipment, Tommy working with a young colt, Pete supervising the evening feed. Home. Not just a place, but a living, thriving community. "I should head back," the widow said. "I'm meeting with the McCarthy family tomorrow to discuss expanding their operation. Margaret wants to add sheep to their cattle. Diversification. Smart. That's what your father always said. The valley's strongest when everyone's trying different approaches, learning from each other." She gathered her reins. "Will you come to the co-op meeting next week? We're voting on new member applications. Wouldn't miss it." She rode off down the trail, and Caleb watched her go. 3 months ago, she'd been his enemy. Now she was something else, an ally, a partner in rebuilding what her anger had almost destroyed. Not quite a friend, not yet, but maybe someday. He looked down at the pocket watch ticking steadily in his palm. Time moving forward, just like the valley, just like all of them, scarred by the past but not trapped in it. Dusty shifted beneath him, eager to get back to the barn and his evening feed. Caleb laughed and tucked the watch away. "All right, boy, let's go home." They descended the ridge as the sun painted the sky orange and gold. Smoke rose from chimneys across the valley, families cooking dinner, settling in for the evening, living the lives that 3 months ago had seemed impossible. At the bottom of the trail, Marcus was waiting. "Thought you might want company riding in." "Always." They rode together toward the ranch, the old man and the young one, continuing the work that Caleb's father had started so many years ago. The work of building community, protecting resources, helping neighbors. The work that never really ended but made every day worthwhile. "Your father would be proud," Marcus said quietly. Caleb smiled. "That's the second time someone's told me that today. Because it's true. He'd see this valley thriving and know his fight wasn't for nothing. It wasn't. None of it was." They rode into the ranch yard as the first stars appeared overhead. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, it always did. But tonight, the valley was at peace, and that was enough. That was everything.